Star Wars. You may have heard of this really niche cult classic franchise about space wizards and galactic conflicts. You might also know that the order of these films can be a little confusing to outsiders, since episode 4, 5 and 6 came before episodes 1, 2 and 3. This means that experiencing the films in different orders can have different effects on the viewer, which has led to fans often debating the ultimate, most effective viewing order. In recent years, most Star Wars fans have suggested the so-called machete order, a concept created by blogger Rod Hilton in 2011. This suggests fans watch A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, then going back and watching Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith before finishing with Return of the Jedi. Hilton claims this order maintains the saga as Luke's story, treating the prequels like a flashback to explain Vader being Luke's father. This is generally considered the definitive, best way to experience the series, but I find it still very flawed since it's too much of a jump back. By the time you start episode 6, you've spent as much time with Anakin as you have with Luke, and even more time with Obi-Wan than either, so it doesn't achieve that intention of maintaining Luke's story, so you have a bit less of an emotional attachment. However, there is a simple, yet probably controversial way to improve the machete order. All you have to do is put Attack of the Clones first. Now, before you jump in and tell me how bad Attack of the Clones is, I already know. It's not exactly the best place to begin a Star Wars marathon, especially if you're a brand new viewer going in with fresh eyes. It's also a placement machete order made sure to avoid, since Hilton's order allows the audience to bookend the series with two really great movies. Now, personally, I've never thought Attack of the Clones is unforgivably bad, but it's definitely flawed and can turn a lot of people away from the series if that's their introduction. But I suppose if you can overcome that hurdle, then you have the 3 best movies in a row immediately after. So the trade-off is probably worth it. And look, you could say all this ordering business isn't worth a hassle, and I'd probably agree with that. In fact, pretty much every Star Wars fan ever first watched in either release order or narrative order, so it's not like you need to watch in some wild order to get the most out of the series. I just think it opens up some new dimensions to such a massive franchise, allowing you to see certain plot points in a completely different way. One of the best points the machete order makes is that the Phantom Menace is essentially irrelevant to the wider story, since nothing it shows you isn't later implied in conversation or opening crawls, along with removing things like Jar Jar, confusing character relationships and Anakin's lack of a father, so leaving it out actually streamlines the story. The only things that suffer as a result are the relationship between Anakin and C-3PO, along with the establishment of Anakin and his mother being slaves. But all of these are the same problems the machete order itself encounters, however. And to be brutally honest, if you really want the full story, you'd watch Phantom Menace anyway. Both my order and the machete order just mean you don't have to convince someone to watch the Phantom Menace at any point. Similarly, a lot of people hate Attack of the Clones, but by placing it at the beginning, you spend time with Anakin and Obi-Wan first and foremost. They're presented as the protagonists, heroes of the Shining Republic being forced into bodyguard duty, dealing with shadowy threats and political intrigue they never anticipated. There's the apparent rise of a mystical opposing faction at the hands of the former Jedi Count Dooku and his secret master Darth Sidious, with everything culminating in the peacekeeping Jedi having to take up arms against the Separatists. We last see Anakin and Obi-Wan at the beginning of the Clone Wars, wondering what their future holds as Anakin struggles with his emotions and attachments, whilst Obi-Wan grapples with raising and teaching this volatile and reckless young man. By skipping the Phantom Menace, their history is implied, so you gain a new appreciation for their bond, and a more understandable, suggested backstory for Anakin and Padme's secret relationship, since you can just take it to assume they grew up together. However, by having Attack of the Clones kickstart the narrative, you get to see what the universe was like before the Empire, with this prophecy about Anakin bringing balance to the Force. However, rather than seeing Anakin's fall and the rise of the Empire, you skip forward 22 years, when the galaxy is still at war, but different this time. Now the reassuring sight of a clone trooper has been replaced by the imposing stormtroopers, as the Empire seeks to tighten its grip on the universe. We also soon meet a new Skywalker named Luke, also growing up on Tatooine, in the very same Lars homestead we were introduced to in Attack of the Clones. There are mentions of Luke's dead father, but it's still left quite vague, even after watching Attack of the Clones, so it maintains the mystery from the original movie. This all changes when we meet Obi-Wan, whose new appearance makes you wonder what could have possibly happened for him to become this old hermit acting under a different name on a desolate planet, especially because he doesn't recognise either R2-D2 or C-3PO. It's then that he drops the mother of all bombs, something that hits harder if you're fresh off watching Attack of the Clones. Anakin is Luke's father, but died during the Clone Wars, struck down by the imposing Darth Vader from the opening, another fallen Jedi like Count Dooku before. In both release and machete order, you have no idea who Anakin is, or what the Clone Wars are. Sure, it's still a very powerful moment and a stellar piece of world building, but if you watch Attack of the Clones first, you're familiar with both of these things, but not too familiar enough to have spoiled future revelations. I think it makes the scene so much more important for the wider narrative, building Vader up as the ultimate villain, striking down not only Anakin but also Obi-Wan later, both protagonists from the previous film. By the end of A New Hope, you have an understanding of just how dramatically this galaxy has changed. The Republic has been replaced by this villainous empire with their super weapons. The Jedi and the Force have become myth and legend, along with there no longer being the safety of settings like Coruscant. There's no safety in A New Hope. The heroes are chased and hunted wherever they go. A sharp contrast to the free and easy travel of Attack of the Clones. But most importantly of them all, you end up wondering how Anakin, such a bright-eyed and promising Jedi destined to save the Force, could have been killed so soon after the viewer last saw him. And with the death of Obi-Wan, it appears like you'll never get an answer to that, because aside from R2 and C-3PO, any link to that previous movie has been destroyed, even the Lars family. All Luke has now is this ragtag group of rebel fugitives, so you relate to his despair at losing his mentor to the same monster that orphaned him. He's an unlikely war hero from humble origins, just like his father before him. There are parallels, and there's also a lot of intrigue left over, many questions left unanswered, so it all sets the stage for Empire Strikes Back very effectively. Empire Strikes Back has a 3-year time skip following on from A New Hope, so it makes sense to continue the journey with it, especially as the earlier context of Attack of the Clones also helps bring some new elements to such a brilliant, classic movie, although it doesn't pull on this context as much as A New Hope does. There is also one problem if you watch that earlier movie first. It spoils Yoda's introduction, since we already know the twist that this kooky, senile green creature on a swamp planet is actually the mystical Jedi Master Luke is searching for. However, the trade-off to this is that we find out, albeit briefly, who is really pulling the strings of the Empire. Darth Sidious. We had seen the shadowy Sith Lord lurking in the corners of Attack of the Clones, masterminding Dooku's plan, but seeing him even in a short hologram scene tells you he won. With the help of Vader, he somehow eliminated the Jedi and established his empire, exactly what he and Dooku were planning in Attack of the Clones. We still don't know how this came to pass however, so it maintains good stakes for Revenge of the Sith when we eventually get there. Also, a smaller yet appreciated benefit of watching Attack of the Clones before Empire Strikes Back is knowing who Boba Fett is. Originally, when this faceless bounty hunter is introduced, you don't really know anything about him. He just kind of follows the protagonist and hangs out with Vader on Bespin. However, watching this after that prequel makes it a surprise that he returns, because we already know the name Boba Fett. We also know that he hates Jedi for killing his father, so it makes a lot of sense he will crop up as soon as another Jedi appears in this galaxy. It gives him a good reason for being in the movie beyond simply getting paid. The ultimate benefit of this revised viewing order comes at the end of Empire Strikes Back, with one of the most famous scenes in cinema history.
No, I am your father.
Regardless of whether someone is a Star Wars fan or not, they will know this moment, as this intimidating, titanic villain reveals that he didn't kill Luke's father, because he is Anakin Skywalker. Even without seeing the prequels, this scene is incredibly memorable and impactful, but going into it already knowing who Anakin is adds so much more. We spent an entire movie with the Jedi, so we have a certain image of him in our head. He was brash and arrogant, but he meant well, simply struggling growing up this way with the expectations everyone else bestowed upon him. He had struck out in anger and revenge at the Tusken Raiders, but from a viewer's standpoint, we can at least understand his motivation because of his mother being enslaved by him. It was still a dark moment, but becoming this figurehead of the oppressive empire and killing his very mentor Obi-Wan are a wild, unbelievable escalation of that. Everything about this simple line shakes the audience to their very core, making them reevaluate everything they thought they knew. It answers one question, but makes you ask so many more. You're desperate to know and understand exactly how all of this came to pass, and what pushed the character to become everything he was fighting against. The Machete Order dictates that after watching Empire Strikes Back, you watch Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith as a flashback to give you these answers of how both the Republic and Anakin himself fell. But all you really need as a flashback is Revenge of the Sith, since that's when all the pieces truly fall into place. Anakin succumbs to the dark side and becomes Vader. Order 66 wipes out the Jedi, forcing Yoda and Obi-Wan into exile. The kind, gentle Palpatine from Attack of the Clones is revealed as the sinister Darth Sidious, who cements his power and forms the Galactic Empire. Obi-Wan is forced to cut down his former Padawan, who becomes imprisoned within his imposing suit of armour just as Padme gives birth to Luke and Leia. It also gives you the kicker of Padme insisting there's still good in Anakin, planting the seeds for the climax of Return of the Jedi, where the fallen hero redeems himself by destroying the Emperor and finally ending all the suffering he himself helped cause. Revenge of the Sith answers all your questions within one movie. You don't need Attack of the Clones as part of this flashback, because it's not immediately important for resolving these questions. Instead, you go straight from finding out Vader is Luke's father to seeing the exact events that led directly to episodes 4 and 5. It still explains that revelation while still delivering a heartbreaking narrative filling in the gap. It forms a smooth bridge to set up the ultimate conclusion of the saga, and also still reaps all the benefits the Machete Order gives you, with Luke's own path to the dark side and Return of the Jedi. Seeing Anakin's fall makes you worry the same could happen to Luke when the Emperor tempts him too, so the journey feels a lot bumpier. Shoehorning in Attack of the Clones after Empire doesn't maintain the emotional connection or pacing of the series, especially because you go from the best movie to arguably the worst, potentially killing any motivation or enjoyment of such a gripping narrative up until this point. Sure, it gives you 2 very pessimistic episodes in a row, but I think that just makes the ultimate victory even sweeter. Only having Revenge of the Sith as the flashback also means Return of the Jedi has the benefit of A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back still being very recent and fresh in your mind, keeping you invested in Luke's heroic journey to fulfill his father's prophecy and defeat the Sith once and for all. So when you reach the end, seeing the galaxy freeing itself from the shackles, it feels so rewarding and liberating. You've been on this rollercoaster ride of false dawns and Pyrrhic victories, but it's finally over. Together, Luke and Anakin have brought balance to the Force. Darth Sidious has at last been vanquished after 40 years of terror, and our heroes can now step out into the universe, free from persecution, and work together to rebuild the galaxy and return it to that shining beacon of hope we saw at the very beginning of our journey. It's the perfect ending to the original trilogy and this saga. Where Attack of the Clones ended with doubt and uncertainty about the future, Return of the Jedi stands proudly and confirms that hope has returned. It's an optimistic ending for every character, even Darth Vader. Our protagonist can ride off into the sunset and it feels overwhelmingly happy, thanks to everything we've just gone through. And they never made another movie ever again. There is no perfect way to watch Star Wars. No matter how you arrange it, there will always be some twist spoiled or some context missing. And even when you do orders like mine and the Machete Order, you're missing films like Rogue One and entire shows like the Clone Wars, all of which bring a lot of their own context to big story beats, but at the cost of the smooth pacing of such orders. However, that doesn't mean you can't experiment with viewing orders to find a new appreciation for films you've seen a dozen times before, which is partly why I stumbled upon the idea of a slightly different take on the Machete Order, with the simple alteration of one single movie's place in the lineup. There's so much new context and subtext involved in the adventure, bringing new aspects to countless characters and redefining some iconic moments. And at the end of the day, isn't that a good thing? So, if you're thinking about rewatching Star Wars again but want to spice it up, give the Harbo Order a try to see what you think. And as always, thanks for watching. And I'd like to give an extra special thank you to my Diamond level patron Daniel Shillito, my Platinum patron Fallon Cortez, and all my Gold level patrons Alex Marston, Calvin, Franz Horn aka Line Vortex, George, Herna Verzog, and Stefan Evan Miller. Thank you so much for your support.